Hello, my name is Kathy Ahlin. I'm the 2021 president of the Granite State Women's Council of Realtors. Thank you for joining us as part of NHAR's ongoing monthly educational series, and WCR is proud to be the co-sponsor of today's event, a conversation with Rick Wisler and Mike Porter of the New Hampshire Real Estate Commission. In today's webinar, we are asking Rick and Mike to help explain some of the inner workings of the Real Estate Commission, including its fundamental purpose, its operational structure, licensing, remote continuing education, and the complaint and investigation process, and how to best reduce the risk of ever being brought before the commission. So let's get right to it. And we'll kick it off with the New Hampshire Real Estate Commission Administrator, Rick Wisler. Thanks for being with us today, Rick. And let's start with an overview. What is the purpose of the Real Estate Commission?
That's a good question, Kathy. The purpose of the Real Estate Commission really was established many years ago to license professionals who wish to do business in the real estate profession, whether it's as a salesperson or whether it's as a broker of some type. And we do not get into the nitty-gritty details of the information or requirements during a closing and so forth like that. We also do not get involved into interpreting state laws or state rules. That's not our purpose. We license individuals, but we also are in charge of enforcement, making sure that the licensees are conducting themselves in accordance with the state laws and state rules for real estate, which can all be found on our website. If there is a legal question, though, those questions really should go up to the firm's broker, who may then reach out to the firm's attorney for an interpretation of that state law or state rule. And that would probably be the best course to go. But our purpose really is for the licensing and to hold the licensees accountable to the requirements of state laws and regulations.
Great, thank you, Rick. Next, let's talk about renewals. Online renewals are working well, but are there any suggestions you have for ensuring it goes even more smoothly for a licensee? And how long does it typically take for the licensee to receive their renewal?
Another great question, Kathy. And renewals, online renewals are working well, but they can work better. There's no doubt about it. And just to bring everybody up to speed on what we are trying to do here at OPLC, and let me say first, if you're not aware, the Real Estate Commission used to be its own entity, its own agency that sat by itself in state government and ran. About 5-6 years ago, a piece of legislation was passed that a number of smaller agencies, including real estate and 52 or 53 other professions, were all brought under one agency, and that agency is OPLC. That stands for the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. Now, as part of OPLC, we not only run under the real estate laws and rules, but we also run under OPLC's laws and rules. One of the things that OPLC is doing right now is taking a look at how all 52 or so professions run their individual licensing requirements, including paper forms and online. And real estate is a bit on the forefront of doing online renewals. And we're hoping that in the future, and by in the future, anywhere from 6 to 12 months down the road, that we'll be able to do many of the activities that are done by paper will be done all online. So don't hold me to a date yet. That is in the works, and anybody that deals with software updates, and especially with updating software for 52 professions, understands the complexity of this process. But right now we are taking a look at our online renewals, which can use some improvements in it. There's no doubt about it. And we're hoping to improve that process in the coming months first. And then once we improve those processes, we'll be using that basically the same process of going into that same online portal where you do your online renewals, and you'll be able to do amendment changes. You'll be able to apply for new licenses. Basically anything that's done by paper will be done there. Don't get excited. Don't try to do it yet, but it is coming. Now for the online renewals, The biggest question I think that we see is when people get their renewal notice, which is all sent out by emails now. We don't send out postcards. But when you receive your email notice, it's sent out about 60 days prior to your expiration date. You cannot renew before that time. The system simply won't allow you to. But once you get your email, it'll give you instructions. If you have not previously renewed online, it'll give you instructions with a registration code how to set up an account with us. Once you set up that account, including your user ID and password, then you can go in and renew online. Now, the biggest sticking point for most people is when it comes down to uploading any documents. For example, continuing education courses, you do not need to upload those affidavits. You do need to enter that information, meaning the course number that you completed, the 12 hours of continuing ed and the 3-hour core course. You have to enter that, but you do not need to upload that information. Hold on to the affidavits because you may be randomly selected for an audit. And we do that on a monthly basis of all renewals that come in online. If you are selected, then you have to provide those original documents to the Real Estate Commission. The other sticking point with an online renewal is when it asks for the affidavit form. You may recall when you renewed by paper, it was included in a paper document that your principal broker had to sign off stating that you were still employed with that principal broker. And that's important because sometimes people will change a broker or they will go inactive, but they fail to notify us. So it's important that we get that confirmation that you're still with them. And that is still required with the online renewal. So you will have your principal broker complete the affiliation form and you will upload that form when you renew. For anybody who is renewing as an inactive status, it's still going to request an online affidavit form to be uploaded. Because you're renewing inactive, there is no affiliation. So what you'll do is write on a piece of paper, you're renewing as inactive, and you'll upload it. The system will take it, and you can complete your renewal process without a problem. Other than that, once we receive it, believe it or not, there is still manual processing that happens behind the scenes. We still have staff that takes a look at every online renewal, checks all the boxes to make sure that they were done correctly, make sure that all the information was entered correctly, and then has to key the information in certain parts and generate your renewal certificate, wall certificate, and so forth. Again, in the future, that's all going to go away. So as soon as you enter in your information, your credit card information, everything happens automatically. But until that, we still have to manually process. So the time frame from the time that you complete your renewal until it is completed could take up to 2 weeks, depending on the workload. And we do have a heavy workload, there's no doubt about it. So please allow up to 2 weeks for us to process your renewal. Now, you will see online, if you check your status on our website, that once you complete your online renewal, your status may change from active to active pending renewal. That lets you know that it was submitted into our system. It's just subject to a manual review and processing. But as long as you do that online, you will not be subject to an expiration. You will not be subject to any other fees or anything associated with an expired license, as long as you renew your license online prior to your expiration date.
Thank you, Rick. And if a licensee fails to renew, what should he or she do? Are there penalties for failing to renew?
Renewals are very important that you have to do them by your expiration date. And I'm going to go through some of the things that can happen if you don't do that. And it's important to remember, we send out a renewal notice by email 60 days prior to your expiration date. We also send out another email about 10 days prior to your expiration date. It is important that your email on file with us is correct. And you can check that out by going to your renewal portal online, as though you were going to renew online, and check your demographic information. Make sure your email with us is up to date. If you fail to renew on time, your license becomes expired. The biggest misconception is that people think that there is a grace period of some type after they expire. There's no such thing. There is no defined grace period in our rules or regulations. Once your expiration date comes and goes, you are now expired. You can no longer perform real estate activities. You do have 6 months from the time that you expire so that you can renew with a $60 late fee. There will be no other restrictions other than you can't practice real estate until you do that, but it is subject to a $60 late fee. After 6 months from your expiration date, by law, your license becomes lapsed. Now, lapsed is far more stricter than an expired license. From 6 months to 12 months from your expiration date, your lapsed license can be renewed, but subject to the following conditions. In addition to your $60 late fee and your renewal fee, you will also have a lapsed fee. And that lapsed fee is $200 for every 4 weeks that your license is lapsed. So for example, if your license was lapsed up to 12 months from your expiration date, you could be subject up to a $1,200 to $1,400 lapsed fee in addition to the other fees. Above and beyond that, you have to appear before the commission at a public meeting, and you have the burden of proof. You have to prove that the reason that you allowed your license to go lapsed was for good cause, and good cause is clearly defined in the regulations as health reasons and other reasons beyond your control. And you also have to prove that the time period that you allowed your license to become lapsed is considered reasonable. If the commission accepts both explanations, then the commission may allow your license to be renewed, subject to the additional lapsed fees. However, if you cannot prove that you had a reasonable period of time and a reasonable reason for allowing it to go lapsed, then the commission may deny your renewal and you would have to start all over again. So please do not allow your license to become lapsed. If it's expired, you can renew it for a $60 expiration late fee, but do not allow it to go beyond 6 months and before 12 months. If it goes beyond 12 months, and we've had some licensees who had expired licenses for 12 years and simply wanted to renew them. Anything more than 12 months past your expiration date, you have to start all over again. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's how it's written in the rules.
Excellent, thanks. Next, could you explain the new post-licensing requirements for a new licensee?
Post-licensing requirements, great question. Post-licensing requirements passed back in the beginning of 2020. And this is going to impact first-time renewals for any new licensee starting in February of 2022, February 1st of 2022. So if your license is due to expire and it's your first time renewing on February 1st, 2022 or thereafter, you now fall within these new requirements. There are 4 different courses that have to be taken by first-time renewal licensees. They will include instruction in P&S contracts. They'll also include instruction in ethical behavior, in disclosure forms, and agency. Those 4 topics. Each topic will be at least 2 hours to a maximum of 3 hours. So that'll add up to the 12 hours of continuing education that is normally required. If it's a 2-hour course, then there will be additional required post-licensing courses that will make up the hours difference. And all of these courses will be posted on our webpage that everybody can find. In addition, for those licensees who simply want a different continuing education experience, anybody can take these courses. And I think that they are being developed with that in mind, that it is to everybody's advantage to try to get some background information, especially if you've been in the industry for a while. This is kind of a refresher course. But for first-time licensees, they have to take these. And remember, it's only for those licensees whose expiration dates fall February 1st, 2022 or later. We do have some courses already developed and available for licensees to take now if you wish, but they are not required. But they are posted on our webpage. We do expect providers to start developing additional courses and getting those accredited in the coming months.
And how does someone who has completed pre-licensing then sign up for an exam?
Pre-licensing exams. Good question. This is another topic that we hope to be changing in the coming months, but this is the process right now. Anybody who is becoming licensed for the first time for a salesperson has to take the pre-licensing course, a 40-hour pre-licensing course. For brokers, it's not a specific pre-licensing course. It's 60 hours of continuing education, but some providers have developed broker-specific courses which may devote more time to broker issues than simply taking 60 hours of pre-licensing or of continuing education. So once the pre-licensing is completed, then the applicant will download from our webpage the examination registration form. That form, along with the affidavit showing that you completed the required education and along with the fee, is mailed to the Real Estate Commission. Once we receive that information, it is reviewed to make sure it's all there. And then we upload the candidate's information to the exam company, PSI. PSI then sends an email to the candidate within 2 business days of receiving the information from us. It's important that everybody checks their regular email accounts as well as their spam email accounts, because sometimes PSI's emails end up in spam. But on that email, it will give you complete instructions as to how you're going to register and schedule your examinations. And it'll also give you, I believe, a registration code. Just follow those instructions, get onto the PSI website and schedule your exam. The key thing, the most important thing is once you schedule that exam, it is important that you take it on that scheduled date. If for some reason something comes up and you are unable to go to that scheduled appointment, you need to contact PSI, not us. We have nothing to do with scheduling exams. You need to contact PSI and reschedule the examination. I believe it is their policy that any changes to your schedule must be done within, I believe it's 24 hours of your scheduled time. Otherwise, you forfeit the exam fee. And that is their policy, nothing to do with the Real Estate Commission. And I can understand why they do it, because they need to fill up those seats. There are a large number of applicants waiting to take the exam every day. In fact, we receive anywhere from 20 to 30 applicants each day to take the exam. So they fill up fairly quickly. And so if they have an opening, they like to try to get somebody in there as soon as they can, bump them up on the list. So that's the most important thing. Make sure to show up for your scheduled exam. Otherwise, you may forfeit your exam fee. It is also important that you follow the instructions in the exam candidate's handbook. What can and cannot be brought into the exam site. Make sure to read that as well. And other than that, good luck on the examination. Remember, you have a very limited period of time from the time that you start your pre-licensing course to the time that you have to take your first exam. And then there's another timeline that starts after you take your first exam, in which you have time to complete and pass both of the examinations. Make sure to be aware of that so that you don't miss out on the timeline.
Thank you. And finally, Rick, here's a multi-part question regarding remote learning. Will online continuing education classes be available even after the emergency order ends? How about core or pre-licensing remote courses? And how will those get approved?
For remote courses, again, great question. Thank you for asking. The remote courses for pre-licensing under current rules are required to be in-person classes. Under the health emergency that was passed by Governor Sununu early last year during the beginning stages of the pandemic, he authorized that pre-licensing courses could be taught remotely during the health emergency. And once the health emergency is declared over, that an additional 90 days would be allowed to finish up those remote classes. Now, I don't know when the health emergency will expire and end. But once it does, there's still an additional 90 days. Now, that said, we understand the commission as well as staff dealing with many of the providers, many of the people who are taking the examinations, that they're over the course of the past year, there's found to be value to doing this remotely under the guidelines that we established for the post-licensing. And so we have started the process of changing the rules that will allow remote learning for pre-licensing courses to continue under strict guidelines that were established for post-licensing. Now, anybody who has been aware of the state process to change rules understands the lengthy time it takes to do this. Anybody who does not understand that, let me give you a brief summary. It's 9 months. 9 months from the time that we begin the process to the time that it finishes. That's how long it takes to change rules, any rule, no matter how simple. We started the process about a month and a half ago, so we're into it now. We hope that that process will be completed before the health emergency ends and the 90-day period thereafter expires. If not, there may be other options available to us. We are currently exploring with legal counsel for the state of New Hampshire whether or not we can do other things in an interim basis until the new rules take effect. But for right now, the health emergency is still in effect. It's emergency number 29, Exhibit H, and all of the health emergencies that were issued by the governor can be found on the governor's COVID-19 webpage. And again, it's emergency number 29, Exhibit H. Most courses that pre-licensing courses have been approved for remote during the emergency time period anyway. So I believe that covers most, if not all, of the pre-licensing courses now. But if there are any providers out there who have not yet changed over their pre-licensing course and wish to do so, please contact Don Marrier at oplc.nh.gov. That's DAWN.MARIER at oplc.nh.gov. She's the one that reviews all of the courses and approves them. And if any provider wishes to have their pre-licensing course temporarily approved for remote learning, she's the one to contact. Once the rules become permanent and we can allow this all the time, then of course that would go through the standard process. Again, you would contact Dawn and she would go through that process with you.
Thank you so much, Rick. Next, we'll move on to the investigation side, and there's nobody better to address that than our next guest, the Real Estate Commission's Administrator of Enforcement, Mike Porter. Thanks for being with us, Mike, and let's begin on the subject of complaints. Can you explain how either a consumer or a licensee would file a complaint? How is the Real Estate Commission currently handling the complaint process, and has COVID impacted the investigation process?
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for having me. So my name is Mike Porter. I'm the Administrator 3 of Enforcement at OPLC. So as far as the complaints are concerned, consumer complaints or complaints from fellow licensees are coming in through our enforcement website, and you can reach that by going to www.oplc.nh.gov. When you get to the home screen, you'll select Report Noncompliance. And then once you click on that, you click on the Complete and Submit an Enforcement Complaint form. That's going to be a form that you can fill out online. And at the bottom, you just hit Submit, and it's going to be directed right to our enforcement email address. In the event you run into any struggles, our email is enforcement, as its regular spelling, .complaints@oplc.nh.gov. You can also, you still have the option of printing and mailing a complaint as well. So how is the Real Estate Commission currently handling the complaint process? Well, we've really adopted a philosophy that I think that the licensees will appreciate. You know, as an agency and as the enforcement division, our philosophy is to view each case with an eye toward the public protection of the public health, safety, and welfare, but also ensuring that respondents, licensees, are afforded the due process protections. I think that's a real important aspect of any investigation, is to ensure that the respondents in each case have an opportunity to be heard, but also have the opportunity to present evidence or exhibits that they feel support their case. So right now, as far as the complaint process itself, COVID has impacted the number of complaints we've received. I think we've seen a reduction. We've also had some issues with doing face-to-face interviews, which is something that as investigators we like to do, just because you have that interpersonal communication. Right now, when a complaint is received, we're still following the same, very similar process to what Real Estate Commission has had for years, where the complaint comes in, we then notify the respondent, we give them 30 days to respond. What I will also say is oftentimes, especially with how busy everybody is, you may need extra time. Don't hesitate to call or drop us an email requesting an extension. We generally do that. In many cases, licensees will hire an attorney at the last minute because they're concerned about their livelihood, and the attorneys will reach out to us and request an extension, which we generally give an extension of up to 30 days the first time around. So once the response is received by our division, we have 3 investigators and 1 paralegal who, one of them will be assigned the matter. They'll review the complaint, the response, any exhibits, and if witnesses are required to be interviewed, they will conduct those interviews, and then a report of investigation is drafted. That report of investigation will then go, specifically for the Real Estate Commission, it will be assigned to 1 commissioner who will be the evaluating commissioner. That member will be recused from that point forward. So they're going to see the ROI, the report of investigation. They're going to see the complaint, the response, and any exhibits that are provided. Once that review is completed, the commissioner will then make a recommendation to the commission. It's a very short recommendation. Either there's insufficient facts to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that a violation has occurred, or contrary to that, that there are sufficient facts which they're requiring the matter to be heard at an adjudication down the road. Once that happens, if, let's say, the commission decides that they want to go the adjudication route, the file is sent back to enforcement, where we then hand it off to our prosecution unit. Currently, we have 1 chief prosecutor and then another attorney in the office. And what they'll generally do is they will review the case from a legal perspective. Are there sufficient facts to go forward? If not, then they may make a recommendation to dismiss. Oftentimes what they will do is reach out to the licensee or their counsel, and within the first 60 days, we're going to try to settle the case as best we can. Settlement is oftentimes preferred in these cases, rather than going to a full hearing. And what will happen is, when both parties agree to let's say a violation or multiple violations, a stipulated agreement will be then presented to the commission for their approval, or they can reject it. If it's rejected, then it's, in all likelihood, we're going to go to hearing. If it's approved, it will be then put into a format of a formal settlement agreement, which will then be executed by all the parties. Really, the commission has 3 options when the evaluator presents their recommendation. They can either dismiss the matter entirely, they can dismiss it with what's called a confidential letter of concern, and that letter remains confidential. It is not part of a disciplinary record, or again, like I said, to be heard.
Great. Thank you, Mike. On a related subject, how many investigators do you currently have? And does the Real Estate Commission conduct proactive investigations, or are they only conducted in a response to a complaint?
That's a great question, Kathy. And I do want to reiterate, we do currently have 3 investigators. We also have a full-time paralegal. The paralegal shifts her duties between investigations and as well as assisting with prosecution. But what's also unique is having the 2 attorneys as part of enforcement. Oftentimes, if throughout the course of an investigation there's a legal question, we can have that answered rapidly. We don't have to wait 30 or 60 days to get a legal response. And in some instances, I can tell you that in larger cases, maybe fraud or what have you, the attorneys will actually drive the investigation and investigate with the investigators. We are hoping to hire additional investigators soon. After the next budget cycle, we're hopeful. And because we now cover all 54 boards, not just real estate. And I can tell you, though, real estate cases tend to take a little bit longer just because of the volume of paperwork that we receive. One transaction file could be upwards of 100 pages. And all the investigators are trained in how to, what to look for in a contract, what to look for in the statutes. And I'll give you one real quick example, which is hidden defects. What is the licensee's responsibility to report that? And it comes down to actual knowledge, and that turns out to be a legal definition of what is actual knowledge. Mere constructive knowledge is not enough. And there's also no duty to investigate further on behalf of the licensee. So when we get those cases in, that's where you're going to see the attorney help the investigator interpret whether there was actual knowledge or constructive knowledge. So the next so that's what we have as far as staffing in our enforcement division currently. That's our complement. As far as proactive investigations, I would say that they're less likely. However, we do from time to time, we will learn information on our own that may be something, and I'll give one example. We received a phone call with regard to an escrow account. So we took it upon ourselves to file a complaint, move forward, and in a situation like that, that could be deemed an emergency. And under the Administrative Procedure Act, 541A, we do have the right, if we believe that there's a danger to the imminent danger to the public health, safety, or welfare, we have the right to conduct an expedited investigation, and then, if necessary, suspend the license pending the outcome of the investigation. The licensee would have an opportunity to be heard within 10 working days. And the only matter to be discussed at that stage is whether we had the right to suspend up front and whether that suspension should continue. Maybe they have access to a bank account with escrow funds, and we don't want that to happen. So our goal is to minimize any impact right away. So, those are proactive cases. But I would say a majority of our cases come in the form of a complaint, a filed complaint.
Good to know. Thank you. Next up, Mike, let's talk about your job in the context of this unique market that we're all living and working in. With high demand for housing, low inventory, and multiple offers for properties, what sort of complaints are the most common? And did you see more complaints than usual in 2020?
2020, I don't think we saw, I don't think we've hit that cycle yet. I think we're just about to enter that phase. A lot of the complaints that we are seeing are what I like to term either buyer or seller remorse, where they believe that so in buyer remorse, they feel that their agent didn't really represent their best interest in getting the best possible price. And conversely, we have sellers who feel they could have received another, $50,000 above asking. we're seeing a lot of remorse, really. As far as licensees themselves, a lot of the complaints that we do get really surround whether there's been unfair or deceptive business practices of a fellow licensee. Did they advertise properly? Did they, these perpetual open houses, which we don't really see much right now. But the other thing is we've seen where open houses have literally generated, 10 or more offers. And, some sellers will say, well, did my agent provide me with the highest offer? And there's a lot of second guessing that's going on. But I can tell you from our perspective, from an investigative aspect, when two parties agree on a price, that's the price. The value really is what the buyer wants the value to be. If they've agreed to purchase this property at, $250,000, we're really not going to look so much into the mindset of the agent as much as we are, was the contract filled out properly? Were the addendums proper? The other issue we get a lot of complaints on post-closing are, well, my agent didn't tell me that I should have a home inspection. Well, oftentimes the home inspections are waived right there in the addendum. When you have 5 or 6 bids on one property, and you voluntarily agree to waive that property inspection, it's rather difficult to come back 6 months later when you have that leak that you didn't know about. And so those are the types of things that we are seeing. But I will say, as far as complaint numbers, I think we're going to start to hit that cycle sometime in the fall, where we may see that increase.
Interesting, thanks. And Mike, are you seeing more complaints for advertising violations?
Not as many as we used to. So this is one thing about the commission, and I hope the licensees really appreciate this. We're not going to play the gotcha game. Oftentimes, advertisement violations were brought in by fellow licensees, and oftentimes they were used as a way to maybe jam up that licensee. So what we've done is Bobby Mayo in our office about 1.5 years ago, or 2 years ago, we drafted a letter. So what happens is, if somebody comes in with an advertisement complaint, what we'll do is we'll send a letter out to the alleged violator, outlining what the complaint is, and here's the statute for advertising. I think it's 331A16. And we highlight that section and say, please correct any advertisement issues. We'll give them a chance to fix it, because more often than not, it's not an intentional act. We've seen it where they have sent out a template to a printer, and the printer has taken it upon themselves to, maybe omit the phone number or omit something that's vital. And so we really want to give the licensees an opportunity. If after we've given that opportunity to correct the advertisement, they still haven't, then yes, we would file a complaint. But I would say that those advertisement complaints are down significantly.
Got it. Thank you. And finally, here's the $64,000 question, Mike. What advice would you give a licensee to ensure they never have to come before the commission?
Wow. So Kathy, that's a head scratcher. I'm just going to say this is a tough one. It's tough because anybody can file a complaint about anything. And it is incumbent upon the licensee to respond, even if they believe it's frivolous. And we've seen that. My number one piece of advice is, if a complaint is filed against you, respond within the 30 days. If for whatever reason you're not able to make that 30-day deadline, request an extension. The worst thing you can do is ignore a complaint or ignore the deadlines. But I'm going to give a little bit of guidance on some of the issues that will absolutely get you before the commission. And these are ones I think everybody knows the significance, but believe it or not, under the administrative rule REA 7, I think it's 701.01, brokerage relationship disclosure forms. You know, I'm not going to sit here and give you legal advice as to when the first business meeting occurs, but I will tell you that if a complaint comes in, and even though the complaint itself may be frivolous, but we find that you haven't filled out that one form, that is likely going to get you before the commission. As trivial as it may sound, that is something the commission takes very seriously. The next one that will absolutely get you before the commission itself is submitting an online renewal without completing the required CEs. If you submit that renewal online and you submit that, you are attesting that you have met all the minimum qualifications for renewal. If your name is pulled at random in an audit, or if a licensing clerk just happens to stumble upon the fact that maybe the CE number isn't correct, and we find out that you did not satisfy the requirements, you will find yourself before the board, the commission, no question about it. The bigger issues under 331A26 under prohibited conduct that will absolutely get you before the commission is breaching a fiduciary duty owed by a licensee to the principal of a real estate transaction. And where we see this more often than not is in the exclusive listing agreements under duties of firm. The fiduciary duties are laid out very specifically there. And where firms or licensees really get into trouble is when they, if the firm engages in disclosed dual agency, you've got to get that in writing, because what we have seen is where it's an exclusive seller's agreement, excuse me, and all of a sudden you bring another party to the table, and for some reason that transaction falls apart. One of those parties is going to claim that you breached a fiduciary duty that you owed to them. So, you know, really when you have a disclosed dual agency, just absolutely make sure that you don't breeze through that contract and forget to check off the box signatures. That is vital. But speaking of writings, this is an area that I think many licensees don't even realize they're doing, but this is in regards to addendums to contracts. I'll give you one that I've seen more frequently than not is appliances shall remain with the home. That's great. Define appliance. Is a washer and dryer an appliance? Is the blender an appliance? I mean, believe it or not, we've had these complaints. And so what I tell licensees to do is don't be vague, be specific, because this way, 6 months down the road, when you're trying to piece it together and a complaint has been lodged against you, at least you're going to have something in writing to refresh your memory. The other thing about written addendums, emails, text messages, Facebook messages, while we could probably devise, if we see a string of messages where there's some sort of an agreement, I can tell you that the courts themselves, if these hit the courts, will look at what's in the four corners of the actual contract. This happened not too long ago with a hot tub spa. There were text messages back and forth. There was a couple of emails, but come closing day, final walkthrough, the hot tub was gone. And in the end, it was never really legally addressed in the addendum. That case did go to court, and the court said, "Listen, we have to look what's in the four corners of the contract, nothing outside of that." So, be very, very specific in what you write. Write what you mean and mean what you write, and have those items signed off on, because again, 6 months, even a year to a year and a half down the road, we've seen some of these complaints come in over a year. You're going to have a recollection, or you're going to have the evidence to say, no, that's just not true. I like to call that the ambiguity of words. Don't be ambiguous. Another issue that'll get you before the commission is practicing on an expired license. We have seen a number of those cases come in. The problem is it will not just bring you before the commission, it is likely to bring your principal broker before the commission as well. We understand people get busy, but there's a lot that goes into this. If your license expires, for example, and you're the principal broker, then everybody under you is not licensed at that point in time. So any transactions that you've conducted could be called into question. I do think that when it comes to expiration of licenses, especially through COVID, we understand that some people might be delayed, but we also do look at it with the lens of every 2 years your license expires. You know what your CE requirements are, and you should have, whether it's on your phone, desktop calendar, my recommendation, renew well in advance. Therefore, this way, in the event you're missing a CE or something, you'll have the ability to do that right away. But yeah, practicing on an expired license is definitely something that will bring you and the principal broker before the commission. So now this doesn't really involve licensees, but this is a matter I know many licensees are concerned with in the state, and that's the unlicensed practice in New Hampshire. Especially in light with the market, the lack of inventory at high demand from buyers. We have seen licensees come into this state and try to practice. I can tell you right now, I think we had 2 or 3 settlement agreements recently where we had licensees from out of state conducting commercial transactions without the appropriate cooperative brokerage agreement and so forth. And if I will tell you that the commission's stance is very strong on this, that under the 331A34, if you are found to have practiced without a license in New Hampshire, we can reach out for the economic gain or benefit from that transaction, or $10,000, whichever is greater. The commission is very serious about this. Recently, like I said, we had some settlement agreements where we couldn't determine whether there was an economic gain or benefit, but we did go after the max $10,000 fine that is, we're allowed to do so under the statute. If there are mitigating circumstances that go along with it, the fine can be adjusted. But we are max fining on unlicensed practice. Our belief is that it's unfair to the licensees in the state of New Hampshire, and it's very unfair to the consumers as well, if they are not being represented by people who are licensed in this state. It takes away from the hard work that our licensees in the state put forward in the profession, and we are very aggressive on those cases. So those are the issues that will definitely get you before the board. What I will say and repeat again, though, is I hope that licensees will see this difference in that we're really focusing on the due process rights of licensees. This is your profession. We're not going to play gotcha. Those days have been over for a while, but we're not going back to that. You are going to be afforded every opportunity to respond and be heard. And I think as you see cases move forward, you'll see that. So that's, in closing, I do also want to say this about New Hampshire licensees. Maybe it's because we're the live free or die state, but I would have to say, of all the professions, of all 54 boards that I work with now, real estate licensees seem to do a great job of self-policing. Licensees don't seem to have a problem picking up the phone talking to either, a fellow principal broker or what have you, and trying to resolve issues at that level before reaching a complaint. I found that the self-policing of licensees in real estate is probably better than many professions out there. And I think everybody should be commended for that, because it demonstrates to us from an enforcement perspective that you take your profession seriously and that your license does mean something to you.
That's a lot of great information. So thanks to the Real Estate Commission Administrator Rick Wisler and Investigator Mike Porter for joining us today and sharing your insights. I hope our New Hampshire Realtor members found this informative as I did. And if you have any questions as it may relate to the issues we discussed, the Real Estate Commission website can be found on the screen. And you can contact the commission at 603-271-7928 or by email at nhrec@oplc.nh.gov. Thank you all for watching.